when our kids hurt, we hurt. It doesn't matter if they're 5 years old, 25 years old, or if we're old enough that they're 55 years old. When they have pain, we care. We love them. And that's why you're watching this. Your child, no matter what age he or she is now, is in a marriage that's in trouble. And you, because of that great protection you feel as a father or mother, even a grandmother or grandfather, you want to help. You want to do something to help this person that you love get through this time. And yet, you don't know exactly what to do. You're a little bit afraid of doing the wrong thing, but thinking no matter, even if it's the wrong thing, I need to do something because my child hurts. Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam with Marriage Helper. With me today here in the studio, we have Jim Porteau. Jim is my dear, dear friend. In addition, he's our Director of Operations here at Marriage Helper, and he's over all of our coaches that work with people, marriages worldwide, literally. So, Jim, let's talk about this for a few minutes. We've seen this happen. And as a matter of fact, one of our own team members was telling me just this morning that he had gotten a couple of calls even in the last few days from parents saying, my kids, my child, whatever you want to call them, they have a marriage that's in trouble, and I don't know what to do. What would we say, or what would you suggest, I should say, is the very first thing they should not do?
Well, I can really imagine that there's a lot of emotion involved with this, with a mom or a dad or both looking down at their kids and just thinking I've got to be able to do something. There's got to be. We can't stand to watch people in pain. And I know this, that when it comes to people wanting to be a part of a community or be in something, there has to be a sense of I'm accepted. There has to be a sense of that because of that acceptance, I feel like I belong. And that acceptance actually brings a certain amount of compromise. If we can open up and allow people space to develop while we're supporting them, they actually have more room to change. And I think one of the things that a lot of folks try to do, no matter what the relationship is, whether it's a good friend, parent, or anything, is they step in and they try to control it. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. You should do this. And that could come from a lot of different areas in what we teach in. It can come from our fears. It can come from our pride or what we think we know better. It could even come from just a spiritual aspect of it, so to speak. But the bottom line is nobody likes being controlled.
Even if it's mom or dad.
Well, no, and sometimes especially if it's mom or dad.
And so the first thing we suggest is this. While you want to help, and we're glad you want to help. We're glad that you love your children, or perhaps even your in-laws. If it's your son, your daughter-in-law, if it's your daughter, your son-in-law, I hope that you love them as well. Although I realize that if that person's hurting your child right now, you might not be thinking very good things about them. But what we're saying is, if you step in thinking, I'm the hero, I'm going to fix this, not only might you alienate the in-law, but you may actually alienate your own child because they're going to say, good grief, I'm not 5 years old anymore. So be very, very careful that you don't step in and take control. What else would we say be careful not to do before we give you suggestions as to what to do?
Yeah, I think I would be careful to back off on your own values. And what I mean by that is that it's a lot of times when folks are doing things, you said, well, Jim, Joe, y'all just said don't control, which means I need to accept what they're doing. So that means I have to accept everything about them and everything they do. Well, we know that not to be true just in general of life.
Right.
I can accept the person, but it doesn't mean I have to endorse their actions. And I think that's where a lot of folks come in. And now I think this is a touchy subject. And I don't think that we can just give a single as it were, word or a single phrase, then it's going to cover it all. Because although these situations are similar, they're very different of what the relationship's like with your child, what the relationship's like with your in-law or your son-in-law or daughter-in-law. For instance, when Shannon and I were separated, she and my stepmother were very close, talked for a while. And there was a point when Shannon and my stepmom, who was a support for her, my stepmom said, I think I might have to back off a little bit. Because I want to be able to love Jim, but in talking to you right now, I'm afraid of a couple things. Number one, I'm afraid that I may be tempted to act on your behalf. The second thing is that I need to be able to support Jim where he is and love him as a human being, and accept him where he is, even though I'm not putting my stamp of approval on some of the lifestyle stuff he's doing. And I think that's a challenge for most especially people of faith, when it comes to their children.
Right, but we see it all the time, don't we? That, okay, my son is doing things very contradictory to what we brought him up to believe, what we brought him up to do. We taught him a certain sense of values and morals, and right now he's living against that. Are you saying that I should not love him? No, we're not saying that at all. You love him no matter what. But it doesn't mean that you endorse everything that he does. Because if he's doing things he shouldn't be doing, you can still love him without making it appear to him or his wife or to her or her husband, without it making it appear to either one of those people like, this is quite okay with me. Whatever you do is fine with me because you're my child. Although sometimes parents think that way. Yes, this is against my belief and value system. It's against what we taught you, but because I love you, I'm going to back you and endorse you whatever decision you make. Our recommendation is this, and Jim just said it, I'm reiterating it. Stay with what you believe. Stay with what you taught the kid when he or she was much younger. And love them no matter what, but you don't endorse what they're doing. For example, when Alice and I were divorced before we remarried each other, I started dating, and I was back in this home area where my mother and father lived. And my mother would have never, she accepted the fact that I was dating other women because it was true. Might as well accept that it's happening. Accept the fact that Joe divorced Alice. It's true, it's happening. But if I had brought one of those girls to their house and said, we're going to spend the night here, the answer would have been, oh, no. You're not going to do that, because what we believe and what we've taught you to believe, we're going to stand by. So while we love you, we'll be with you. We are here for you. We are not going to let you do something. At least we're not going to be part. We're not going to be part of something you do that's against our beliefs and value system. Yet we see it all the time. Why do you think sometimes parents do that? Like, I've always thought that was wrong, but now I seem to be endorsing you doing it.
I think it's out of fear a lot of times. I'm just afraid that if I don't, they're going to break off relationship with me, or they're not going to be a part of the family or whatever. And I think I see a mixture of both sides of this. One is where the parent just gets into it, and it's like, okay, this behavioral change has occurred, and let me just jump in and support them. And there are emotional and relationship changes that we do that are just as negative in the effect on the human as a drug addict. And so most of these parents would never think of, well, look, I love you, but I'm not. I think those drugs are killing you. They're against our values. But I tell you what, I'm buying some meth for you, and you come by the house. It's kind of ludicrous to put it that way, but when it comes to relationships, we kind of alter it. It's like we make an excuse for it. And I can't decide that for each person's household. It depends on your values.
Oh, they're unique situations.
It really is. But to stay in what you believe and be consistent in it, and be careful about selecting that person and proving your point on that person. I think what happens is the inconsistency in values sometimes sticks out where parents aren't doing it. But the other thing I've seen, Joe, is a parent jumps in where they have a value system, and because their son or daughter is not working within that value system, they then cut that child off.
Right.
And sometimes the reasoning I think behind that is basically, well, I'm not going to talk to them until they change, which is actually control, or I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm not going to include them unless they change. And we know that doesn't work either. These are tensions that are not easy to deal with or handle, but you can navigate them. There just isn't one single answer that's going to cover it.
Exactly. And so what we're saying is, if the beliefs and values you held before your kid got into trouble in his or her marriage, if they were true then and valuable and worth living by before this, then they're also true to live by even while this is happening.
Yeah.
So love the kid. Talk to him, her, no matter what age they are. Be there for them. Let them know that you love them in all kinds of ways, but you don't have to endorse. Because one of the persons that helped, as a matter of fact, he was a key factor in bringing me back to my senses when I was divorced. He called me every 2 weeks. I mean, he lived in a different place, just to check on me, chat, talk to me. I knew he believed that what I was doing was very wrong, but he showed me love through the entire process. So when I began to turn and come back, he was the first guy I went to.
Absolutely.
Here's another thing to be careful of. We'll start to the positives after this. Don't believe that everything your child tells you is true. Right?
Well, you didn't believe it when they were a child. And and we just get bigger and hopefully a little smarter. I think that not insinuating that your child will be lying or things like that, but
Yeah, we're not calling him names or characterizing him.
No,
but people in these situations.
Oh, they have a different perspective, and not only that, when we are doing things that are in contrast to our values. And we move into cognitive dissonance. We move into a place where we're struggling with what we do, not lining up with our values. Justification is a very powerful thing for survival. And I have watched people who are people of faith, people of the Bible, come away and make comments like, well, God has told me to leave my wife or leave my husband and get in with and be with this other person. Now, a remedial review of Scripture would tell you there is no way that fits anywhere.
Even if you believe that to be true.
Yeah, even if you believe it. The bottom line is
didn't
it's
tell
not.
you that.
Yeah, no way. And right. So, but people, I know a friend of mine used to say, man, don't become a make-believer. Don't make stuff up and believe it. And it's amazing how many people actually do it. I know that myself, when I was away from Shannon, away from my faith, I became pretty good at that. And so the things I told my grandparents, I remember, told my stepmom, things like that, they didn't line up with anything, whether it was Shannon as being a villain, or what I was doing, and I wasn't always forthright and coming clean with what I was doing. That's for sure.
Neither was I. And when I would talk to my parents, I would vilify Alice. I would say all kinds of terrible things, and to their credit. And they're not, psychology majors. They don't have PhDs. Both graduated from high school and did pretty well in life after that. But I'd say all those negative things about Alice, and they would sit and they would listen and never bought any of it.
No, I don't think mine did either. I want to be clear.
But they didn't yell at me. They didn't say you're crazy. They just said, we understand that's how you feel. But they never bought it. Don't believe everything your child tells you, because they will vilify in all likelihood the other person, because we tend to justify ourselves. All right, let's get to a couple of positives because we have a few minutes left on this. The first is this: be very, very careful about the advice you give your child, because even though you love and you care and you've gained some wisdom from life, you are biased. Even if you think you're not, you probably, or as a matter of fact, in all likelihood, are biased. And some of the advice that you'll give your child could actually lead to the destruction of the marriage rather than the salvation, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more difficult the closer you are emotionally to someone to be able to have clear eyes and a clear mind. Emotion clouds everything. And one of the things that our coaches do for our people is to be able to sit in with them and not be overly emotionally connected to that situation. And they have clear eyes, clear thoughts to be able to step back and say, okay, I feel what you're saying, I comprehend that, but your emotion may be leading you a little stray there. It might be a little clouded in what you might want to do there. Not only to mention that what worked in your particular situation as a couple may not be exactly accurate to the situation your son or daughter or son-in-law or daughter-in-law are in, because they're unique people. There are some principles that we know go across the board, but you just don't know exactly. I hear parents a lot of times say, you should do this, you should do this, or I did this and it worked. And I think the struggle there is we don't know why it worked if it did work.
So understand that point. You need to be aware. This is a do. I must be aware that whatever I'm saying to my child could be biased. Therefore, I need to be extremely careful about what I tell him or her, because I don't have a clear objective. Now, the second do is, but you do talk.
Absolutely.
You do have these conversations, but I wouldn't try to act like mom or dad in the sense of, oh, I'm putting you back in the little boy or little girl chair and telling you exactly what to do. Not that, but the talk where when they talk to you, that you listen, you try to understand. And you can tell them what you think. But we're saying being very, very careful when you do so, that you're not saying, you need to go do this, you need to go do that, you need to go do that, because you may be giving the wrong advice. And so in that situation, as you talk to them, listen, you can share your heart, you can share your mind. Be careful, though, that you're not vilifying the in-law. Be careful that you're not giving bad advice because you're mad at him or her for whatever it is that they've done or doing, or that because you're believing everything your child told you about that person. That if you share what you think and feel, be very guarded, very careful, and very wise. Which leads me to the last do we'll put in this video. Do encourage your kid to get the right help.
Yeah. I think, and it's knowing where to look. Now, there's a lot of information out there, and I believe I love the internet. I know I can find some different things out there when I'm looking for it. there's a lot of very confusing and a lot of bad info out there. We're constantly coming around it, and so help them get the right help. If they need spiritual guidance and things like that, I mean, part of the faith system, wherever faith you are, if you're Christian, go see your pastor, things like that. If it's in regards to they're looking for relationship help, I can't think of a better place to turn them to than to Marriage Helper. We have been helping literally thousands of people. We've had hundreds of thousands of people come through the program, and so we have the experience, we have the research, we have the ability and the tools to put in their hands for them to make steps that are needed to not just repair that marriage, but actually create a one that's powerful.
Oh, I'm convinced that we have a lot to offer. If you're saying, well, no, now you got to sound like a commercial. I'm going to get my kid to go see this marriage counselor or that one. That's fine. That's certainly the suggestion or recommendation you can make. If you're going to do that, a couple of things. Number one, don't send them to a counselor or some kind of a guidance person that's really close to you. Because then they wind up as prejudiced as you are, and you do have prejudice in all likelihood, you do, and so will he or she. So don't send them to my best friend who's the counselor. Be smarter than that. And if you're going to check out a marriage counselor, if you're going to find out, then find out if he or she really is pro-marriage and proactive toward helping the marriage rather than somebody that's going to help them split up. We've been working through this whole thing, Jim, with the premise that you probably want your kid's marriage to make it. That's the last thing we're going to talk about. You see, if you're angry at your in-law, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, you may be thinking, wow, you just married the wrong person. You need to get out of this thing. Please don't be the person that destroys your kid's marriage. I mean, I'm sure that your in-law is flawed, but so is your child and so are you. And so rather than doing things that would encourage the ending of the marriage just because you're mad at the other person or angry or you just want to wrap up and control what's going on, we have been working under the assumptions of this whole video, and now I'm going to make a point of it. Do what it takes to help them save the marriage rather than destroy it. I've seen so many parents, Jim, step around and go, well, she was the wrong person to begin with. He was the wrong guy to begin with. We're just going to get you out of this because you should have been out of it a long time ago. And if that happens, then they are the ones that become a big factor in making these marriage end. Nobody is perfect, right?
No.
So why should a parent want them to make the marriage work?
Yeah, well, number one, it's really not your marriage.
It's not your marriage. It's their
And
marriage.
so you need to be really careful about that. And a side note I'd like to add before is that I was a very fortunate person that when Shannon and I got back together after all my craziness, my in-laws were very receptive. In the beginning, they were careful to make sure that she was checking her options, and not options for other men, but I mean that she was really validating things. Yeah. Are you sure you've thought about this type thing? So it wasn't a talking out of being with me, rather making sure she had processed things. And I think that made it better. It was appreciative of that.
Sure.
Well, once Shannon set her mind to it, they got on board with it. And I think it's important because if not, you'll end up fracturing the relationship you have with your own child. That's their choice, and that's what they want to do. And if you're not careful, I'm afraid you'll put yourself in a place that's not gonna be fulfilling for you or them. And that takes a lot of repair. It takes a lot of repair.
So if you're looking through all this and say, okay, I've heard what you had to say, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean about this point, or I have questions about that point, we understand that. We're just doing a very brief video here. Here's what you can do. You call us at our office number, which is 866-903-0990. Now understand, that's not a hotline. It's not going to put you right in touch with a counselor. That's not what it is. But we can get you with a client representative where he or she can tell you about what we can offer to help your child with his or her marriage. And if indeed they would come to one of our workshops, we ask that you encourage them to do so. Not browbeat them, not try to control them, but say, it'd be worthwhile to check it out because of your future. So let me be proactive here and try to help you rather than to harm you. And that's the ultimate end. Mm-hmm. When your kid's in trouble with a marriage already, don't make it worse. Don't harm. And so summarizing, that's by controlling. That's by believing everything your kid says. None of those kinds of things. Love them no matter what, but don't endorse the behaviors that are against the beliefs and values that you've taught them and that you still adhere to. Do understand that you probably are biased and therefore be very careful about what you say. You can talk to them. That's good. But when you understand that bias, then you understand that you're not giving advice. You're listening, sharing your heart, but you're listening. And ultimately, if you want to help, even if you think the marriage shouldn't continue, to help your kid, refer them to some good help. And we'd like to be that if you will allow us to do so. Jim, thank you for sharing this with me, and I hope that if you're a parent listening and watching this, that you'll contact us to help you help your children. Thank you.